Hey, hello, 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 hello. The sun is trying to murder me. I am not prepared for this. Spring is here, and with it comes the burning, cursed moon, and I am an indoor pet, and I cannot handle this. Anyway, it's been a while. February was real bad, March was real bad, and by real bad I mean brain weather was not good. I struggle with major depression, I struggle with anxiety, and the last couple of months were real bad. April has so far proved to be tentatively a lot better. I've still got a lot of stressors going on right now, but like I'm doing my best. And so I wanted to get back on the vlog train. And so one thing I've been thinking about, actually a lot longer than just recently, but one of the things that I've been thinking about is the magician. Some of you might be aware of a writer, internet person, fandom person named Sam Starbuck, who created a tarot spread a couple of years ago called the Four Royal Advisors. And one of the things about the Four Royal Advisors, like you use every card in your deck, you use all 78 cards, but you draw a card for yourself. And I do one of these every New Year's Eve for my new year. And this past New Year's Eve, I drew the magician for myself, which on the one hand, like, sounds really great, because it's like, oh, hey, mastery, oh, hey, knowing what you're doing, oh, hey, having control over stuff, and those are a lot of things that I do not feel like are real for me. But I feel like I have the potential to muster, I guess. And so one of the things that's been occupying my free brain cycles is thinking about like what the magician means to me as a card. Boy, that's loud. But also kind of deconstructing the way that the magician is cast traditionally, because one of the words that gets thrown around a lot is mastery. And so I was thinking about affirmations, like, one of the big ones that I thought about was, I transmute my circumstances, which is a great idea that I try to do, I try to work on. But another one that I was thinking about was, like, I master myself and my tools. And I think a lot of us, when we think about self-mastery, get weirdly authoritarian with ourselves and weirdly violent with ourselves and weirdly cruel with ourselves, especially for those of us who have a lot of spots that are still fragile or healing, or are recovering from various things, or in recovery, or whatever. Is you create like a hard, like a hard stricture, crystallized in a box sort of experience for yourself repeatedly, and it causes you to suffer more. And that's definitely been my experience. Like, I grew up Southern Baptist and internalized a lot of things about how things have to be black and white. And part of my work as a human being has been to kind of undo a lot of that, and be more open and be more able to be okay with many kinds of truth. And so, like, I think traditionally, like, yeah, that would be one thing that someone would say if, they're like, yes, I'm going to embody a magician, I master myself and my tools. But for me, that's not satisfying. For me, that leads down a path of self-injury. And so I'm thinking about ways of expressing what I really want out of that. And so, I know myself, I embrace myself, or, like my tools, like I embrace my tools, like I use them. And so thinking about like what an affirmation, with regard to, making the kind of movements that someone who is embodying the magician for a year might say, is, I am the magician, I embrace myself and my tools, I transmute my circumstances, I move forward and make, and thinking about those kinds of descriptions of what one does, in that archetype, I think has been really important to me this year. and I'm not really there yet. Like we're in month 4 of 12, and I'm still figuring this out. But it's been a really kind of fertile vein for me to think about how I think about being an expert, because I do really value expertise. I think it's so important. How I think about learning, how I think about gently holding myself to standards, instead of, kind of declaring, well, if I can't do this basic thing, then like I'm bullshit. Um, and so yeah, like this week I've been really inspired by doing some of that work. Like, if you read my blog last week, it's about. It was actually another tarot card thing. It was the Fool, because we're moving into April, and thinking about, how to be hopeful when you're still not feeling well, um, or how to be inspired when you're not feeling inspired, and that's been, that's also been a thing of the past 2 months. Is the parts of my brain that are able to be enthusiastic in a particular way have been, weighed down trying to get the day-to-day handled. So, yeah. So, I guess the takeaway for this week, and that I'm curious about for others, is, how do you think about that concept of someone who is an expert, or has obtained a high level of skill, or is embodying themselves, or knows themselves, or like thinking about, like, if you are into tarot at all, like, what is the magician to you, but also, like, what are some ways that aren't. I feel like the word authoritarian is maybe almost the best way to express this, that aren't that way, and yet still make room for, the idea of skill and expertise and earned respect. One other, maybe piece of related media for this week, there's a podcast called Why Is This Happening that Chris Hayes from MSNBC does. And what he does is every week he sits down with someone who, is an expert, or is writing in a field, or is thinking about a certain thing, or is an activist. And this week, he does an interview with a person who was unschooled up until like high school, up until their teens. And the idea of like democracy and what all of that means, and like how those concepts of like, well, what is a democracy, and what is personal freedom, and what is like the spaces that we have to be people creating ourselves, and it's sort of an interesting conversation that also kind of got me thinking about some of the ways to sort of deconstruct this archetype, and make it something that feels healthier, moving forward, instead of something that will make me feel like I need to force myself into smaller and smaller boxes. So that is like 8 minutes of me yammering about a thing. So please yammer back at me. Thank you as always. Say hi. And yeah, it's good to do this thing again. Hopefully we'll be doing this weekly. So